Hey guys, my name's Khadroth, and today I'm going to be going over with you guys our Anniversary 6 GSSR. This has been a video that a lot of people have asked me to make. People have been coming into me asking me, hey Cad, can you just go through this? Can you go over some of the units? Can you tell us, who to roll for and that sort of thing? Again, I'm going to say that this sort of thing is always in the eye of the beholder. It's going to depend on your account, who you actually really desire, but I'm going to try to give you the best gameplay advice that I can with regards to this. Now, again, just understand that your preferences may differ. You may find certain units more useful to you. You may desire certain units more. So just keep that in mind as you go through, and you might find that maybe there's a unit here that I cover that you're not really sure, you didn't really know quite that much about, or you didn't realize that they could be useful for you. So just talking here really briefly about how the GSSR works. Remember that you are required to have 15 paid courts in order to be able to roll for it. I talked about this in my Anni 6 review, that the issue here is again going to be that you need to make sure that it's all paid. So whenever you purchase a pack, part of the pack in which you purchase will be paid courts, and another part of it will be bonus courts. The bonus courts is considered to be free courts. So it's not going to count towards the premium courts that you need, the 15 paid courts, in order to be able to add to that. Chad has informed me that the cheapest way to do this is basically to buy a 12 pack and then either do singles or do a 4 pack on top of that. For someone like me, I tend to be a whaley person. I tend to buy full packs because that allows me to get the most bang for my buck in terms of actual efficiency. Buying the max pack gets you the most courts total in terms of the cheapest rates. But if you're just trying to do it on a budget, if you're trying to purchase it as little as possible, it sounds like the 12 pack and then whatever else you need to pick up the remainder is the way to go. So again, that's the easiest way to get it. This particular GSSR will also end up having a guaranteed 5-star for you, as well as a guaranteed 4-star and 3-star of each group. And you're going to see it's divided up by year, as well as divided up by either 4 Horsemen or, again, 3 Knights banners. And so the way those work is going to be that the 3 Knights banner is essentially your Saber, Archer, and Lancer triangle, and the 4 Horsemen is going to be your Caster, Assassin, Rider, and Berserker triangle, if you will. Again, square, I guess you could call it in that case. So it's going to be divided up by year across each of these banners. So you're going to have 2 choices for every single year. However, you only have the ability to pick 1. That is to say, again, you only get 1 roll for your GSSR. You're not able to pick 1 per year. It's just there are 2 options for each year, but you can only pick 1 of all of the banners to roll, if that makes it clear for you. Again, so it is going to be something that you guys really have to make sure that you sort of choose wisely, that you're confident in what you want. So I'm going to go through this with you guys and talk about them as we go. Now, Fandom doesn't really have the best way of displaying this, but I do find that it at least kind of keeps things clear and concise. And to show you at least one of the considerations that you're going to have, you're going to start out right here with basically your 2015 into 2016 banner. And then that's going to be, again, your 3 Knight classes, one up here. The one down here is going to be your 4 Horsemen plus extra. And so the way to understand it is that you can get any of the 4 stars and any of the 3 stars from this year, regardless of which of these 2 that you choose to roll. So that's the better way to understand it, is that the 4 stars and 3 stars are all year, and the 5 stars are divided up into their groups for the year. So you could get a scenario where maybe you end up rolling Gil on the first banner and you end up getting Martha as your 4-star. But that doesn't mean that you wouldn't be able to get Martha if you had also rolled the 4 Horsemen version and gotten Kentucky. You might still end up with Martha. So that's the easy way to think about it. But again, there are different options for across all of the years, and so we're going to go through it to the best of my ability. I'm going to talk with you guys a little bit about some of the 4-star options that I think are worthy of you knowing, and again, maybe point out when I think the 3-star options are worthy, but we're not going to do a lot of analysis on them. I will end up talking with you guys about the 5 stars though, and I'm going to try to do a very quick down and dirty analysis on them. So, to start out with here, we basically have, again, our Sabers, Archers, and Lancers, and this is for year 1 of FGO. Basically, 2015, as it was on JP, this would be functionally 2017 on NA. But again, due to the 2-year gap, your dates are going to be a little bit different, so I'm going to try to talk about them in terms of what year they should be. So functionally, your year 1 banner here, you've got Okita. Okita is still a unit that holds up really well over time. She is a single target Saber. She didn't get her NP interlude like some of the other single target Sabers did, but she did get the Shikuchi buff, and she does very quickly here after Anniversary end up with a charge buff. It actually should come to us after, I believe, Summer. So again, that's going to be a really nice upgrade for her and keep her sort of relevant in spite of the fact that she is quick, and she's still a really good time attack servant, a unit that's really good with her card performance and handling challenge scenarios. So I do think she's worthy of your attention in that regard. Nero Bride is a unit that has been really good as a single target as well. She's gotten a lot of buffs over the years, and her most recent one actually gave her the ability to add Sky Niche to it. So not only is she a 30% charger with 40% attack up, and all of her skills are targetable, so she can either use them on herself or use them on someone else, but she's also going to have that Sky Niche to help her both function alongside Castoria and again complementary to Castoria rather than being competitive to her. So she's a really nice unit to have. She can work in either obviously, you know, arts comps, but she can also work for you in quick comps depending on the refund capability of a unit. So I do think Nero Bride is a solid addition and one of the sort of sneaky supports that's on here. Void Shiki is a good unit for AoE and again being able to death proc certain waves. The big problem that she has is she doesn't really have a whole lot of charge capacity. She's got a 1-hit NP, so she doesn't end up having the ability to easily refund. Thankfully, with Oberon coming into the game, being able to 3-turn with her is certainly going to be possible, as any unit that has 10% charge in their kit will be able to 3-turn. And again, she's one of those units that ends up having it on the back end of her NP, so regardless of the fact that she has a 1-hit arts NP, she can still be made to loop for you. You just got to be careful. Remember that death procs can also get in the way of certain things with regards to refund, but hopefully you're not counting on her actual refund and are going to instead brute force it. That being said, Saber Shiki does still hit decently hard as an AoE Arts Saber, so I do think she's worthy of your consideration, but logically we're now in the era where Muramasa and, again, some of our other units are just getting really strong. So I do think Void Shiki into the future here could use a little bit more attention, but she wouldn't be the worst thing to pick up for you. Now, looking right here, we have Archer Gil. Archer Gil actually just got a really strong buff on JP that sort of catapulted him back to the top of the AoE Archer category. He's long been a solid unit, and he even rivals some of the single target archers in terms of damage output due to the fact that his niche is again, like servant there. So it's going to apply to just about all the bosses that you fight. Obviously, if the boss isn't a servant, then it won't, but it's still a really good niche for him to have and something that I think he really excels at. His overall performance is just stellar, so you really can't go wrong ever picking up Gil unless you just already had NP5 of him. From there, you've got Lancer Shisho. She is a single target Lancer. Her refund is not the best, but we can still make do and manage to be able to NP with her multiple times. The big thing you're going to want to watch out for is the fact that her quick card actually doesn't give that good of refund even with her skill pop. So one of the best ways to actually get refund with her is actually going to be utilizing an arts card lead and then following it up with double buster cards. Now, certainly when Mighty Chain comes into play, this does change things around for how you want to card with her some, but still, it is a weird thing that her buster card actually ends up generating more Noble Phantasm than her quick card. That is just her primary concern, though, as otherwise she does stellar damage and she does manage to stun with every single one of her NPs. On top of that, she is anti-divine and undead, which is a really, really strong niche to have. And again, I think you'll see that having Shisho allows you to just really hit some archer units hard. Now, from there we end up with Brynn, and Brynn has for a long time just been a sort of like second fiddle to Shisho, but recently with the buffs to Enkidu in the past couple of years, Enkidu has really taken off. Bryn can still hold her own though, as until you get to the point that Enkidu gets the 50% charge buff, Bryn has managed to be a unit that is actually capable of 3-turning with the Koyanskaya and Oberon setup. So due to the fact that she has Buster Synergy, you're going to see her stock sort of take off quite a bit more thanks to the prolific supports that she now has coming into the game that she can work with. On top of that, she also has the Brynhilder's Beloved niche, which is a sort of unique one. It applies to several servants that Bryn loves, and it has a tendency to allow her to out-damage a lot of her other sort of counterparts in the Lancer class. So there's a lot of units that fall under this, but primarily you're going to be concerned with obviously the archers and maybe even berserkers that would have that trait. Still, Bryn could be a really solid addition to your roster since she has that 30% charge. Now, this is going to be our 4 horsemen for year 1. So right here we have Iskandar, and Iskandar is a unit that hits really hard. I think the big issue with him is he doesn't have any sort of charge in the game at this point. So we just got done talking about how any unit with 10% charge can actually manage to 3-turn. Iskandar is not one of those. There are some funky ways you can maybe make something work, but I'm going to tell you that for the most part, the big reason you want Iskandar is the fact that he hits hard and again can actually buff a lot of your party. He has all 3 types of major buff with attack up, NP damage up, as well as Buster up for himself. That's really, really good and going to allow him to hit hard and maybe even help out his allies around him. So he's still a decent AoE rider to pick up. Shooting Assassin is our AoE assassin here, and she's not a bad one. She's AoE, she's art, she's single hit NP, so you're not going to get a lot of refund with her, but she does have a 30% charge skill in her kit now, and that will allow her to be able to 3-turn in a lot of scenarios, so she can still do some solid work for you, and she definitely hits hard. I think the big consideration whenever we're looking at a lot of these AoE assassins is obviously going to be the prolific AoE assassin welfares that we have coming up. You guys just got Kichi Hogan. You're going to get a buff to Gray as well as her return next year. And again, you're going to see the Assassin Valkyries coming out into the future. So Assassin shooting can be a great one for you, especially if you like her, but do keep in mind you're going to have some stiff competition coming in the future. MHX here has been a long maligned unit as she has not had a whole lot of good kit for a long time, but she does end up getting a lot of buffs that really help her out, and her damage is actually pretty stellar now, all things considered. The big issue that you have is the wonky sort of delayed stun proc on her first skill there, but it's now been made to have an additional defense down proc on it, so it still has some offensive applications, making her kit still pretty decent, like I said, for damage output. You're going to want to pair her with Scotty and units like that in order to allow her to really pop off, but I often find that MHX's real true niche is actually going up against Sabers, as again, her third skill allows her to have extra damage to the point of pretty much being effective against them, regardless of the fact that she is an assassin. So again, I do think she's a really decent unit nowadays and is no longer really worthy of the bad rap that she used to get, but certainly there are some people that will still look at her as not the best of the assassins. From here, we have Kentoki Berserker, and Kentoki Berserker has gotten a really nice NP interlude of late that has really allowed his damage to expand. He was a unit that was hurt pretty badly by the inception of break bars into the game, but he ends up being a lot better now due to his ability to charge 50%, as well as that damage increase, allowing him to sort of function as, hey, I'm going to be able to at least take a break bar with me each time, even if I end up being squishy and dying. From there, though, having the additional Buster supports in the game has really managed to allow him to pop off, so I do think he's a extremely solid single target Berserker option for you on this list. Probably one of the best ones that you can pick up. Raiko Berserker here has certainly always been the benefactor of having 2 really good solid niches in her kit. She is anti-sky and earth as well as anti-demonic. But the issue that she predominantly will have, especially compared against units like Arjuna Alter, or again, some of our newer units like, say, Morgan Le Fay, is that she doesn't have charge. She can still hit hard for you, she can still be a good star generator for you, but I think that is going to be the ultimate factor in your decision. If you don't immediately already love Mama Raiko, I think you're going to see that gameplay-wise, she could use some love nowadays. Looking at, again, Amakusa here. Amakusa is actually another unit that's gotten a lot of attention over the years. I think the big reason that they've given him so much attention in the damage department is due to the sort of addition of Summer Abbey to the game. They've really helped him come on a lot since then, and he is a solid AoE ruler now. The big problem that you're going to have is he's not really much of a looper, as the way his charge works is rather wonky. But the upside to this is that Amakusa has the ability to strip all buffs from the enemy before his damage goes out, and that alone makes him useful to have. He is someone that cannot be stopped as long as the enemy doesn't have unremovable buffs due to it being a challenge quest or a sort of difficult story fight. He can remove everything, regardless of it being defensive or even something like guts. So again, he's a really solid unit for that reason alone. Looking at Dantes here, Dantes is another one of our AoE Avengers who sort of post Space Ishtar ends up having some attention given to him in the department of being able to charge more. Dantes has gotten a 30% charge skill, and his damage had already been solid, but he was long held back by the fact that he was quick and not really able to handle sort of non-standard node compositions. That is 3-3-3 nodes, any sort of node that was not that. Any sort of node that was instead like 3-1, you know, whatever, or 3-2. Those were sort of the nodes that Dantes would struggle with being quick. Giving him a charge skill has really allowed him to sort of pop off in that. He doesn't have it yet on NA, but this is something you can certainly look forward to in the future, making him a really solid sort of neutral damage option for your account. Now, Jalter is another unit that got a recent NP interlude on JP, and that was sort of necessary to help her damage perform well with her sort of new stiff competition of, again, Tyra coming into the game. Tyra was another unit that sort of ends up rivaling her for that sort of single target Avenger crown, and as a result she also had the ability to sort of refund due to the fact that she was quick and some really good survivability in her kit. So the only thing Jalter really had at that point over her was damage, and there were times that really Tyra could just outpace her in terms of damage with some lucky crits, or again just by virtue of actually managing to have her rare niche in play. So what they end up doing is they end up giving Jalter a nice NP damage interlude, which really helps her pop off and damage even more. And they also end up adding a star bomb to it, allowing her to solve one of her greatest weaknesses, which was the ability to soak stars. Jalter has long been considered to be a crit-centric unit, but being an Avenger and not having a star absorption skill made that pretty difficult to deal with. However, they solved it in the most eloquent way they could, and that was just simply bomb the party with stars while Jalter was on the field. So every time you NP after that interlude upgrade, you're going to get a nice, sizable 30-star bomb that's really going to help her out and really make it so that she does have the capability of being able to crit hard. So I do think Jalter's a really solid single-target Avenger niche for you, and basically going to be someone that you might want to target with that. Now, before we move on to the next year, let's talk about some of the considerations here. Chat had previously mentioned that obviously Salter does not have another banner as of this current moment on JP. You do have the 4-star ticket coming up, so that's something to keep in mind with regards to all of these 4-star units. But certainly, whenever we're looking at these, trying to look at units that are maybe story locked can be a decent idea for units to go after. Again, same thing right here with someone like Tristan, another story locked, or Lalter, a unit that has not gotten a lot of attention that frankly deserves a little bit more. Certainly, you also have some really strong farmers here like Nitocris, and again, I do think obviously Herc and Lancelot can still be very useful to you. So I'm not going to spend too much time talking about some of these units. Just keep in mind that story locked units can be some of your best pickups, as they're not easy to acquire otherwise. With regards to our 3 stars, probably the only one I'm going to end up pointing out here is going to end up being Caster Coup. And the reason for this is because Caster Coup is a story-locked 3-star from the inception of the game. He did recently get another banner with Morgan, but you're not going to see another banner for him for a hot minute, and this is an easy way to get coins for him if you're lucky enough to pull him. But again, it's a big wide pool here, so you might just not get lucky with regards to that. Now, moving on to year 2 of FGO right here. For our, again, sort of night classes here, we end up with Arthur. Arthur is a unit that I think could get a lot of love He really is in dire need of an NP damage interlude, so don't lament if you do pull him, because I do think he'll get one probably fairly soon on JP, but I've been saying that for a long time, and it sort of remains to be seen as to what they're going to do. That being said, I do think that if he gets an NP interlude, especially if they give him sort of the Salter or Gray treatment, they could very easily tack on 10% charge onto the back end of his NP, and that would make him a very fluid 3-turn option within the Koyenskaya and Oberon system there, and allow him to really increase his damage dealing capacity. He is somebody that has the ability to sort of overlap his Buster Up. So again, I think if you actually improve his charge capability slightly and give him an NP interlude, Arthur is actually going to be one of our hardest hitting AoE Sabers. So really strong in that regard. Now, again, we have Musashi Saber here, and she was basically one of our first units to get the NP interlude for Sabers, for single target Sabers, and a lot of people immediately freaked out when that happened. She is a unit that I think really is just strong, and due to the inclusion of Mighty Chain, her card performance, which always was kind of one of her issues for being able to generate Noble Phantasm, is a lot less of an issue, as she can easily manage to form Mighty Chains and really help out with that NP gain issue. Again, they do end up giving her a lot of buffs over time, and she does now have the anti-moon cancer trait, so I do think she is as well as anti-alter ego. I do think she's a very solid pickup for your single target Saber option. Squirtoria is a unit that has just not had a lot of banners over time. She actually just recently got one announced here on JP that I'm going to be looking forward to. But again, she is a unit that, even though she's a year 1 unit, year 2 technically, she came out with the first summer. But even though she's a really early unit in the game, she has still held up amazingly well over time, such to the point that even though she really pales in comparison for damage output behind a lot of other options for single target archer, her ability to just loop fluidly as one of the best refunders in the game, as well as be able to drain enemy units, has allowed her to just really flourish in challenge scenarios and hold up extremely well over time. It is very difficult to do better than pulling a Squirtoria as your single target archer option. Now, looking at Ishtar here, Ishtar is someone that has traded places with Gil in the AoE Archer category for top dog a couple times, and she is a good solid unit to pick up as a 50% charger. She also has a really low cooldown third skill that in the Koyenskaya system can be functionally popped every single turn, and does allow her to get quite a bit of damage output. So I do think that alone would make her worthy of consideration right there. And again, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be after her just because they're Rin fans. So I'm going to say that yes, Ishtar is a phenomenal pickup for your AoE Archer. Moriarty is another single target archer option here, and the only issue I'm going to say that I have with him is just that he kind of, just like Squirtoria, could use a little bit of a bump up in damage at this point. Thankfully, he is Buster synergistic, so he is going to be able to operate in the Koyenskaya and Oberon systems, but I do think the single target archers in general could use some attention in terms of buffs. Still, Moriarty could be a really solid option for you. He does have Invuln Pierce, so I do think he is awesome if you do manage to make, or you do manage to land him, especially if you don't have other single target options. Now, we've got Tamamo Lancer here, and Tamamo Lancer finally ended up getting one of her demerits dealt with and giving her a charge skill that allowed her to function in the Koyenskaya system. NA doesn't have that yet, but it is a very nice upgrade for Tamamo Lancer. It makes her more usable. The primary concern with Tamamo Lancer, she still doesn't have an NP interlude that almost, I believe, every single other single target SSR Lancer has at this point, that at least was released, in the past couple of years. But I am going to say, again, that with regards to the supports and her being Buster synergistic, you can still make stuff work for her. So don't get too concerned about the damage output. It's the easiest thing to correct in the game tends to be damage output. The hardest things to deal with are instead refund and charge. If you don't have those, you may just be shit out of luck. So the fact that they gave her that buff is a huge boon to her regardless. Now, moving on to the sort of Calvary side of things here. We have Ilya, and Ilya is going to get her 50% charge here later this year. That's really going to help her out. That as well will allow her to function as a single target caster in the Koyanskaya system. So it is a huge buff to her, and I do think this allows sort of Ilya to come back into the fold in terms of competition with San Zhang, in terms of, you know, who you might want to go after as your single target caster. Ilya is a really solid option for that. Merlin here is going to be one of the prime supports that you're going to see some people target. There are a lot of people out there that have a tendency to look at Merlin as this sort of dead unit now that Koyanskaya and Oberon exist, but Merlin is still fundamentally more challenge-oriented than any of those other units. Merlin still has a great place in the Invincible comp. I still use him all the time on JP, so he is definitely one of the best units in the game still to this day. Do not let anyone undersell you on that. He is a unit that, if you manage to have him, can get you through quite a bit of the content in the game just for his staying power, his ability to automate healing, his ability to protect the party, and his ability to amplify damage, especially on buster units. Merlin is a solid addition for your support caster and is still meta in that regard. Now, Da Vinci Caster here is basically our top dog for AoE caster. Certainly, we have some issues with that. Again, she did have some RNG aspects to her kit that recently got addressed with a buff on JP. So I do think that Da Vinci Caster is still a very solid pickup for you. She doesn't really have any niche going for her, but she does just have good damage. The big thing you're going to want to watch out for is she does not have good refund. That being said, she does have enough charge in her kit to sort of just make it happen anyways, so she's still a really good arts AoE caster for you. Cleopatra is a unit that I think at this point probably could use some love, at least to help her keep pace in the NP damage department. That being said, Cleopatra's strengths lie elsewhere. She has really good survivability as an AoE buster assassin, and manages to have stellar card performance due to the NP gain and Imperial privilege that she has in her kit. So I don't think you have to worry about her too much for a challenge scenario. It's more going to be if you're trying to utilize her as a farmer. Her charge per turn can get a little bit of weirdness in it, and again, being able to amplify her damage, she's not going to be as damage oriented as some of her other SSR counterparts. So again, still a really good pickup, but probably not the best one for you. Now, looking at King Hassan here. King Hassan's another unit that's come a long way. He's gained charge, he has gained buster up. He is just solid at this point in terms of his ability to stay long term in terms of any sort of fight. Again, I do think King Hassan is one of the best single target assassins in the game at this point, and someone that really you should be thankful for if you have. Don't let anyone tell you that his card performance is bad. He may have a triple buster deck, but even then, his single arts and single quick card are stellar at what they do. And again, having a triple buster deck is never bad for damage, so King Hassan is an amazing unit in that regard. Now, welcome to the best single target archer in the game. Oh, whoops, sorry, I didn't mean that. Well, I kind of did. That is the predominant reason to roll MHXA. She is not only just a hard-hitting single target berserker option as a quick unit, but she's also a unit that has anti-good and anti-saber niches. And both of those are extremely synergistic with each other, so you can double them up. Given the fact that she's already a berserker and already semi-effective, that is where she can be really, really strong for you. That being said, her primary concern is going to be her survivability and the fact that she doesn't have charge built into her kit. But if you do manage to support her correctly with Scotties, with protection, you might be able to see some amazing stuff happen with her in terms of her damage output. Looking at, again, Hijikata right here. Hijikata is another interesting unit in that really what turns around for him is the ability to have guts and the ability of Qingong existing in the game, as he is one of your 1 HP memers. That is to say, the less HP he has, the more damage he does. So the upward scalability of Hijikata's single target buster NP is actually insane now that you have the ability to sort of sacrifice him immediately and get him down to 1 HP. So again, Hijikata might not be everyone's favorite role. They might not be his perfect, like your perfect go-to single target berserker, but he is still a very hard-hitting single target berserker in the right circumstances. Kiara alter ego is not a bad unit by any means. She does kind of see herself getting outpaced nowadays by like Tiamat, or again, even Okitan in the proper sort of buster setup with Koinsky and Oberon. But what she might lack in damage output against those other options, she makes up for in terms of overall kit capability. Kiara just has an insane kit. She has the ability to just sort of protect herself, the ability to charge her NP, the ability to debilitate enemies, the ability to strip their buffs, and the ability to ignore their buffs with her NP. So it's really, really just crazy how solid Kiara can be as an AoE alter ego. Melt as a single target alter ego here is another really stacked option for you. Again, she does very good single target damage as an alter ego, and she has solid survivability with her multi-times dodge, as well as, again, the recent buffs that they've given her to allow her crit damage to stack uncapped. So if you manage to either use her in a solo or use her in a card lock situation, you can start to see some pretty crazy crit numbers flying around. Again, doubly so if you manage to get some Scotty buffs in there as well. So Melt is phenomenal for that reason alone, plus the ability to, again, remove buffs with her NP is just super solid. So I do think Melt is certainly worthy of your attention. Now, with regards to our 4-stars, you can already see that the 4-star and 3-star list here has shrunk because we're no longer in year 1. So again, there's nothing too amazing here to really point out. We've got several limited units. I'm going to say that over time, Surfmo is a still very solid addition and hard to get your hands on. Caster Gil has been someone that has gotten sort of this weird sort of hybrid role as a AoE caster damage dealer who can also support the party. And again, you still have Emiya Archer up here kind of just dishing damage really amazingly as a single target Archer option. So outside of that, there's numerous other options I can point out here that are really solid in their damage performance, or again, just have really interesting mechanics, but those to me are going to be the ones that I would focus on. And again, both of these are story locked 3-stars, so this is a potentially good banner if you're maybe missing, say, Taiga, or again, Christopher Columbus, as you've got very high odds of being able to get them or potentially get more coins for them. Now, moving on to year 3 here. Taking a swig of water for myself. Looking at this, starting out here with the sort of Knight Triangle. Again, you guys can see there we're starting to get some more extra classes in here, so we do have like Sherlock, so it's something to pay attention to. But basically right here we've got Sigurd. Sigurd's a unit that I think a lot of people look at as MP damage and think, oh, that's kind of lackluster, but those people are missing the forest for the trees. His true strength is not his NP damage. His true strength is the fact that this man has one of the highest attack powers amongst all sabers and has 100% crit damage in his kit. If you can feed that man some buster buffs, if you can feed that man some critical stars, he will pop off for you. He will be able to crit down anything that you need him to, and he is a really decent option for a single target saber with regards to that. I think the real concern is going to be his overall survivability, but that is what that is. Again, he just has a steroid tied to his survival skill, which is always kind of a oof sort of pairing right there. But still, again, I do think he could be a solid option for you. Erish Kagal was a unit that I think for a long time people looked at as being low damage. They instead chose to look more at her ability to charge, as well as her ability to buff and protect the party. And that all still stays true, but now with the upcoming buff here this anniversary, you guys are going to be getting a NP damage interlude that helps her damage out pretty good, as well as a super effective anti-earth modifier that's really going to help her damage scalability. This isn't going to help her beat Melisson or anything like that by any means, but it's certainly going to allow her to hold her own and definitely puts her in a lot better of a spot compared to where she used to be. So Erish can still be a really good AoE Lancer for you guys. Now, looking at Sherlock here, I'm going to say Sherlock is probably not going to be my recommendation as far as rulers go, or in terms of like, hey, supports. He's a really fun offensive ruler support. He can give the entire party the ability to invuln pierce and defense pierce. The big thing with him is he is very crit centric and can really work wonders with his card performance. The issue that I have with him is just that he's not meta in that sense, so he's really good for challenges and knockdown drag out fights that last over time, but not so much for again sort of your meta farming or anything like that. So to me, he's probably not going to be a lot of people's first choice, but he's still a good unit and a fun unit, so don't look down on him if you do manage to land him. Okitan is another unit here that, like we talked about with Kiara, has come a long way. She is an AoE buster alter ego, and I think a lot can be said about her with regards to her summer form that's going to be coming up this year. But the big thing to understand is she is a 30% charger, and now with the pins allows you to be able to start and 3-turn from a 50% craft essence starting point with double Koyanskaya and Oberon as her comp. That means that she has some really good scalability, the ability to double up on some of her buffs due to the cooldowns, and it has put Okitan in a much better place than she has been the past couple of years. So if you've maybe been down on Okitan, understand that Okitan's about to get a lot better just by virtue of the supporting cast surrounding her. So again, right here we end up having Abby, and Abby is another unit that I think a lot of people, back when the Foreigners first came out, a lot of people were like, "Ooh man, get Hokusai," and a lot of people quickly came to regret that stance. Not that Hokusai was bad, but that a lot of people realized Hokusai had some issues looping at first, and that Abby was almost immediately useful in both challenge and lotto content, like right after her release. So it was a big thing for people to finally sort of realize that maybe they shouldn't have trashed Abby, because Abby is a really solid boss killing type of unit. She has the ability to strip buffs, and again has charge per turn for the party, as well as NP damage up for the party. So it's a really, really solid option to bring her into a fight in order to allow her to both sort of be a neutral unit against them, be able to remove the enemy's buffs, and sort of be able to just help out the party in general. I do think Abby is really awesome, and that's still not even talking about her terror, the ability for her to debilitate the enemy and sort of lock them down. So again, Abby is a fantastic boss killing foreigner for you. Now, from there we do have Hokusai, and that probably made Hokusai sound bad, but she is not by any means, especially nowadays in the Castoria era. You guys are quickly getting to the point, especially here too with Oberon, that any of your looping concerns are kind of going to be sort of null and void. It's going to more or less come down to instead not can you loop, but how well can you loop and what craft essences can you get away with. And again, Hokusai is probably going to be someone that needs to still start maybe with a 50% CE, but hey, she can still do really solid damage. She still has a really good man niche for you, and I do think that she could be a really solid AoE foreigner option for you for both either farming purposes or, again, anti wave sort of challenges and boss challenges. Again, now looking at our 4 horsemen for this one, we do have Maid Alter, and I've heard a lot of people say that Maid Alter is just not that good. A lot of people will gush over Ozzy, but the one thing that I can say that Maid Alter actually does do pretty well is her card performance is actually pretty awesome, and her NP damage is still very hard. A lot of people have the misconception of thinking Ushi or Kentoki can out damage her, and the reality is, even at NP1, Maid Alter can beat them if you know how to do reloaded memes. That is the ability to double stack her 3rd skill because it's on such a low cooldown. Maid Alter is one of the rare units that does actually have cooldown reduction as part of her own kit, so she can be able to get back to that 3rd skill within 3 turns and just pop off an insanely hard-hitting NP. But again, yes, the big issue that you're going to have is over maybe, say, like a 3-turn duration. She doesn't have charge, so a lot of that consistency is going to be an issue. Still, Maid Alter could be a really solid addition. I do wish that they had buffed her here recently, but I'm going to say her damage isn't really what's in doubt. It's more her kit could certainly be better, and survivability is not the greatest for her. So, from there we end up with Ivan being our next unit. Ivan is a lot of what now I would say Iskandar probably wishes he was. Ivan has gotten a 30% charge skill. He started out as this weird, awkward NP gain-based buster unit, and his real niche was just being able to remove buffs from the enemy with one of his skills. But NP gain-based buster units doesn't sound like the sexiest of combinations, and that's because it's not. So instead, they end up finally giving Ivan some much needed love in terms of buffs, and he is now in a much better place. He hits like a truck, and he has the ability to 3-turn with Koyansky and Oberon, as well as still having that capability to remove buffs. So I do think Ivan is a very solid addition as an AoE rider for any of you. Looking at Umu Caster here, Umu Caster is a unit that has for a long time just been really high on the damage scale. She finally ended up getting passed by Vinci after some time, but she has still always been solid. I do think she's beginning to age some now. She could probably use just an NP interlude, but she is still really solid in damage, and again has invuln pierce every single time she NPs. All of her cooldowns are pretty good except her third skill on a 7-turn cooldown, but it's a targetable gut skill, so it's still pretty damn good in that regard. And I'm gonna say that Umu Caster is a unit that can function for you both as a farming unit or in challenge scenarios, regardless of what app media has tried to claim over the years, because again, I've used her prolifically for that sort of thing. So it definitely depends on what you're trying to do, but I'm going to say that Umu Caster is still really solid. Now, we have another meta support right here. This is going to be a unit that I think a lot of people are going to try to go after, potentially depending on other units that they have, and this is Scotty Caster. A lot of people are going to be looking to the future of Quick and saying, hey, look, I'm just going to get Scotty Summer when she comes around. But honestly, you want both if you can get it, because triple Scotty comps are a thing, and you can do some crazy shit with them. I do recommend, again, picking her up. Even though she's not sort of the best of the meta supports, she's still the best that Quick has right now, and you're not going to be doing a lot with Quick without her. So I do recommend getting her, because you guys still got another year until Summer Scotty. But again, she's a 50% charging unit with AoE defense down to the enemy. That alone is worth something regardless of focusing on Quick. So just having the 50% 3-turn Quick steroid is a blessing in disguise. And again, her NP might not be the most protective, but hey, it can still make you live through a Noble Phantasm here and there. So she's, again, a very solid unit, regardless of what people tend to evaluate her on. Next up here, we've got Semiramis, and I would say Semiramis is probably our AoE assassin at the moment that is in the worst position with regards to SSRs. She really just could end up using, I would say, a very solid damage addition to her kit. She's in dire need of some buffs because she's really getting outpaced by a lot of our welfare options. The easy way to deal with that is to instead roll more copies of her, but even then, pound for pound, rolling more copies of Semiramis versus another AoE SSR assassin, the other AoE SSR assassin probably comes out on top. She can be made to work in the Koyansky and Oberon systems, but yeah, I'm going to say that Semiramis is not the best pickup at the current point in time, because she really does need some love. Now, with regards to our 4 stars and 3 stars, again, nothing here really pointing out to me other than obviously our summer units, and then certainly Fujino, who is a very solid single target archer option, very decent in challenge content, and certainly hard to get your hands on, as she is a very rare limited 4-star. From there, there's really nothing too much to write home about other than Salad Larry, aka Salieri here, who is a limited 3-star. But again, I'm going to say that's probably your chief concerns out of this one. And certainly there are other units here that are good, like Tomoe Archer, or again, Raiko Lancer, or heck, even, Parvati and more, that are very solid options for you. So don't feel too bad if I didn't point one of the units out. Again, looking at our next year here, basically we now have Beni Inma up on the deck. And Beni Inma is a really, really solid unit now, even down the line into where JP currently is. And the reason for this is because Beni Inma is a boss-killing, party-protecting machine. Her kit is already just solid for that in general, but then add in the ability to have AoE party-wide buff removal resistance. Makes her really good in challenge content when the boss you're going up against is some asshole that can strip your buffs. She's going to make it so that that doesn't happen if you play your cards right. And that's one of the reasons I think to really go after her. But to top it off, she hasn't had an NP interlude yet, and she probably will get some at one point. And again, she does have anti-chaotic and anti-evil niche on her NP, which does have a tendency to, again, be synergistic and overlap, allowing you to double up on those niches for even greater damage. So I do think Benny Enma as a single target arts Saber is a really solid one. I do recommend trying to acquire her at some point, because she's one of those units that I don't have on JP that I keep just kicking myself for not having. There are so many potential challenge applications for Benny Enma. Jarger is another interesting unit that I think a lot of people will have something to say now about, due to the fact that Durga has just been released on JP. I do think Jarger is still a really solid option. I'm sure some of you guys are going to be looking forward to Durga in 2 years from now, but hey, you might need something for the next 2 years. There is Zenobia that comes down the line afterwards at Halloween this year, and she's a really solid 4-star permanent challenger to Jarger, but Jarger is not bad by any means. The real concern is her overall low damage output, but her refund is stellar, and she can loop from 0% charge. Even before Castoria was in the game, she was capable of doing that. So again, Jarger has been a unit that I'm going to say almost has too much charge at this point, but it's not a bad problem to have, as it does allow her to even deal with weird set nodes that don't always have 3 enemies in a wave. So Jarger is still a really, really good AoE arts archer. Then we have QSH here, and QSH is basically just going to be your sort of easy challenge solo like ruler. I almost wanted to call him single target there, because he is a predominantly crit focused carding ruler. The way to think about him is he's a sort of less offensive, more like tanky version of Super Orion is the best way I can say it. If you line up his buffs at the right time, he's really going to pop off, and you're really going to be able to do solid damage with him. As long as the enemy doesn't have buff removal, or again, something like, say, Invuln Pierce, you should be fine, and QSH should be easily able to waltz right over them. Again, be careful who you make fun of in high school, because Nobu Avenger has now become sort of top dog for AoE Avengers in that regard. A lot of people don't realize this, but coming up here, she's going to end up getting a buff that changes her ability to charge from 20% to 30%. And that really does change things for her. With Koyan Sky and Oberon in the game, this allows her to start from 50% charge, and it makes her incredibly hard hitting, both for her NP as well as her ability to deal damage with her cards. She is able to double stack that insane 70% attack up skill that she has, so you can really already, just from that anecdote alone, get an idea of what her damage scaling is like now in the Koyan Skaya setups where units can double things up. So again, we have a unit that a lot of people maligned early on her release, but now has become sort of a just sheer monster in terms of her farm ability and damage output capability. So yes, I do think Nobu Avenger is a really solid addition to your roster, assuming you can get your hands on those meta supports. Now we end up having King Protea here, and King Protea is a really interesting option, I'm gonna say. She can hit hard for you, but she is sort of clunky in the way her charge and HP per turn mechanics can work. So I will say that King Parte is a really fun unit to use in challenges. It's actually pretty hilarious to watch as the enemy tries to NP her and doesn't kill her. In fact, sometimes they hardly even put a dent in her if you play your cards right. But I am going to say that she's not the most meta of units, and she's not a unit that you have to have by any means. If you want a nice AoE alter ego, I do think she can serve as that for you, though, and she is particularly good in a challenge environment. Then we end up having Summer Bibi, and Summer Bibi is known for her card lock memes, but that's not all that she does. She does have the ability to charge 50%, she does have the ability to have an AoE drain on her NP, and she does have a little bit of survivability with both healing and dodge in her kit. But yes, the primary big noticeable skill on her is the fact that she has the ability to lock down a unit's cards for, again, multiple turns, for 3 turns. Just beware that while, yeah, you get stars per turn on that, you get the cards locked in, you also have the potential chance of, if you plug suit, if the party rotates somehow via Miss Crane, or again, a sacrifice, or someone dying, all of those things will break the card lock, so be very careful with how you utilize it. But if you do utilize it correctly, yeah, you can pull off some really insane stuff. And that does make her a fun unit to have regardless. Next up here, we've got Reigns, and I think a lot of people would maybe say Reigns isn't meta. I would say Reigns still is. The issue that you have is predominantly that Oberon has come out, and Oberon still can replace her in that regard. He can end up dealing a lot more damage, but Reigns still does a lot of really nice stuff. She is still a 50% charger, and she still gives 40% attack up, which is more than, say, Waver. Waver has the advantage of being able to give attack up to multiple units. Reigns has the ability to give sort of 40% attack up rather than Waver's 30%, but hers is to one unit. So Reigns is a little bit better than Waver for focusing on a single damage dealing unit, handling multiple ways. That's where I'm going to say she's a really solid option for you, especially if you're someone that doesn't have something like Oberon. She is probably going to be your best third support in a lot of those scenarios where you don't have her, or where you don't have him. And so in that regard, I do think Reigns still has a very nice place and still has a very defensive kit, especially given the fact that unlike most other supports, she is not a caster, she's a rider. So she could be pretty decent for you if you are going up against, say, another rider boss or something like that. From here, we have Murasaki, and Murasaki is another unit that, just like with Benny Enma, provides party-wide AoE buff removal resistance. So it is pretty nice whenever you take her. Murasaki is going to be able to stop the party from being buff stripped. However, her main primary use, as a lot of people will see her, is as an AoE arts looping caster. She does have anti-demonic niche in her kit, and so in that regard, I do think she could be a solid addition. Some people will end up having units like, say, Seed Caster that are, again, sort of a competing welfare against her. But again, I think that buff removal resistance is a big reason to have her regardless. And so to me, if Benny Enma is the sort of single target boss killer with buff removal resistance, that makes Benny Enma one of your go-to ones for sort of wave clearing instead in a challenge scenario. So I do think, again, Murasaki here can be a really solid addition for you guys. Now, Koma just recently had a banner on JP. A lot of people were saying that they thought she should have gotten a buff, but I'm going to tell you flat out that if I could only have one assassin in the game as a single target, Koma is probably the one that I would have. And the reason for this is just because she has an unexpiring guts, she has 50% charge, she is anti-alter ego, she has overcharge and heal up in her kit. And again, I do think that any sort of demerit that Koma has can basically be dealt with via command codes. So Koma is just still one of our best performing assassins in the game to date. And so, yeah, I do think that even though she's quick, she is one of those units that just really works well in spite of that. And she does have the ability to loop her NP with card performance, with buffs from supports, and be able to charm lock enemies with that NP. So, yeah, Koma is, you basically can't go wrong by pulling her in that sense. Next up here, we've got Arjuna Alter, who is going to be our AoE Berserker. And again, he's a 30% charging AoE Berserker that hits like a ton of bricks. You can absolutely 3-turn with him with the Koyan Sky and Oberon system, so I do think he is going to be a great pickup for anyone that manages to roll him. This is going to make this particular instance right here between Reigns, Koma, and him alone just a really solid one right there in case a person is new and needs some additional options for powerful units. But again, I'm going to say Arjuna Alter here is really solid. There's been a lot that's been said about him versus someone like Morgan Le Fay. He does do more damage than Morgan Le Fay. However, Morgan Le Fay has some sort of additional uses that maybe you're not going to consider too much with Arjuna Alter. But I do think Arjuna Alter's primary concern instead is going to be what happens when you get outside of 3 turns, what happens when the enemies are somehow debuff resistant or debuff immune. That's where a lot of his damage is going to potentially fall off. So as long as you watch out for those scenarios, you should be fine, but Arjuna Alter is still a really good unit even to this day on JP. Now looking at again our 4 stars and 3 stars here, obviously not too much to write home about with regards to the 4 stars. Mew is fairly rare and hard to get your hands on here. Certainly you have a unit like Estrella that has been an extremely good boss killing single target ruler there. She's anti-evil, she's arts, it's really, really nice. And even Double X has been a very good boss killer over time. She's anti-threat against humanity, got a 30% charge, she's arts. The only real issue that she has is actually star soaking, and the fact that her primary steroid is only 1 turn. But still, I do think a lot of these units here can be solid. Again, you do have a story locked unit right there with I want to call him Redra due to LB6 story, but again, your Horseman. And then you end up having Asclepius right here as well that can actually be a really decent survival-oriented support unit. He's a decent healer, he gives guts to the entire party, and he's story locked. So yeah, I do think getting him is a really, really solid pickup for those of you guys that maybe lack a unit of that type. Now on to the next tier here. Again, starting out with our knight classes here, we end up with Astolfo Saber here. I'm going to say Astolfo Saber has a very wonky kit. He still does very good damage. He has, in a lot of ways, been sort of buffed to be similar to Okita, but the card performance is not really there in terms of Noble Phantasm generation. I do think one of the weirdest parts about his kit is the fact that he has this sort of buster-focused skill with only 1 buster card, but it is what it is. That being said, with, you know, Summer Scotty now at this point, having both buster and quick-centric things as a quick unit, it's not the worst thing in the world. So I do think Astolfo Saber can be a very solid single-target Saber option for you. From there, we end up with Sei Shonagon, and Sei Shonagon actually has some really solid damage scalability with her triple niches. She's anti-man, anti-shadow, and anti-neutral servant niche right there, and she can potentially triple stack all 3 of them, but it is fairly rare for that to happen. So again, damage isn't really your concern with Sei, and she does have a decent like charge per turn sort of dodge oriented kit that allows her to have some decent staying power over time. I think the big concern with Sei is going to be refund. So you're really going to be wanting to rely on quick and arts crits with her in order to get back to full again, and again potentially supporting her capability to sit there and really pop off in the damage department. So I do think Sei can be a really solid option for you, but yeah, she's not going to be your sort of best, most fluid looper. But again, you don't really care too much about that at this point since Oberon is a thing, and you will be able to brute force a lot of your quick and arts units now. Next up here, you've got Super Orion, and what more needs to be said about him other than this man is a beast. He is anti-beast with his kit. Again, he has the ability to just really pop off with his buster crits. So a lot of what you're going to be doing with him is sort of trying to align the stars in order to make crits happen on his buster card. But you can see crazy stuff from, you know, 200k to even upwards into like the 500 and 600k department on some of his buster crits. And it's pretty nutty how even against neutral enemies he can do it. The big concern I'm going to say with him is actually his survivability. He does have guts in his kit, but outside of that, there's really not a whole lot he has going for him. His NP does allow him to invuln pierce as well, so you don't have to worry too much about an enemy trying to stop him from dealing damage. Instead, it is going to just be about how long can you stay alive in order to align the stars, in order to hit the enemy really hard. But yes, he is one of your premier buster crit units, and he is very carding focused for those of you guys that are maybe looking into class score already on JP. Now, again, next up here we have Roma. Roma has been a very solid AoE Lancer. I think he kind of got the short end of the stick on NA, as again, we already knew that Melisande was coming out and how strong and crazy she was. So I think a lot of people looked at Roma and they either decided, man, I really like him and I'm going to go for him regardless, or I'm okay waiting. That being said, Roma is one of our best damage AoE Lancers. He's got 30% charge and he has insane scalability with his anti-Roman niche. So I don't think you have to worry too much about damage output. Yeah, he might not beat Melisande without some trickeration, but I am going to say that he is a solid option for you and definitely holds up well over time. Certainly even in challenge content. So I don't think you have to worry about him too much. If you get him, certainly be happy you got him. Now for the next part here, and this one's actually a pretty decent banner, I'm going to say as well. as you have Da Vinci Rider here, and she's a unit that, while again damage is somewhat of a concern as an SSR, she still is extremely fluid at her ability to loop as an AoE Arts Rider, and she does help the party with this. She can charge the party on the back end of her NP by 20%, and she does have charge per turn for herself, as well as the ability to charge the party 10% with her third skill and give them NP damage up. She then rounds that all out with a very nice dodge skill, so she does have hard survivability built in, so that does make Da Vinci very good in both farming and challenge applications. From here, we do end up with Musashi Berserker, and I think you could certainly say that you could use Musashi Berserker in a challenge environment if you can manage to 3-turn, but survivability is her big concern. One of her skills ends up chunking her health by quite a bit as it has a nasty demerit on it, but the upside is she definitely does good damage and is a very fluid arts looping AoE Berserker with Invuln Pierce. On top of that, she does at least manage to have a 1x dodge built into her kit with crit damage, so I do think she is a very, very solid farming option for you. And again, you may be able to make her last at least short term in some challenge environments. Obviously, a lot of people are going to be looking forward to Ibuki Berserker into the future, but hey, that one's still a ways away. So again, if you manage to get your own Musashi Berserker, don't lament it. She is still very solid, very good as far as units go. Buntoria. I wish that Buntoria had gotten an NP interlude here, as that is probably her biggest weakness. I think a lot of people look to her as, they look at her NP numbers and they say, hey, she doesn't do that much damage. She's not a good farmer. Certainly, I think that's a concern that you're going to want to think about with regards to Buntoria, is getting more NP levels will help address that concern. But honestly, having some of the Buster meta supports really addresses it as well as it can, right? So she still is a unit that even when dealing neutral damage can manage to, still pop off in terms of farming capability. But the real thing that I think people miss about her is that she is one of, if not the most consistent crit carding unit in the game. And the reason for this is because she has the ability to shuffle the deck and eliminate one of the unit's cards at that current point in time. She still, even there, has the ability to buff the party by 50% crit damage when she does this, as well as give herself NP gain up for that turn. So it is solid, especially when you start thinking about Koyanskaya setups and being able to double it up. This allows her to give 100% party-wide crit damage, so even if you don't get her cards at certain points in times, sometimes even the support has enough crit damage to be able to crit down the wave. So it makes it really hilarious how consistent it can be in spite of it being a carding strat. I often have used her to handle odd set nodes where there's a single enemy wave, or again, even in spite of her low NP damage, I've allowed her to mop up after the fact consistently by using cards. So she is a unit that you're able to get away with more than you would think you can. And again, this is where I'm going to say I think a lot of people sell her short. She does still, as a AoE Buster-oriented ruler, have a hard survival skill in her deck too. And considering she has arguably some of the highest health in the game as a unit, it definitely helps her pay off in terms of survivability as a ruler. From here, we have Space Ishtar. Now, Space Ishtar, I think a lot has been said about her over time. She is an amazing unit. She has the ability of changing her NP to all 3 card types, but I think her strongest use is where she is arts. Certainly, you can utilize her actually pretty well and make her deal a lot of damage in the Buster system, but there are some wonky things that you have to do with that sometimes. And again, I do think over time, the devs have realized that they maybe made Space Ishtar too strong. That's a good problem for you if you manage to acquire her, because, oh no, they made your unit that you just acquired too good. But I do think this is where you started to see units like Dante's, like Summer Kama, like, Mao Nobu get attention in terms of being able to combat her, so that rather than her being a master of all trades, Space Ishtar becomes more of a jack of all trades. And that way there are other units that can outperform her in their single card type at given moments. But I am going to say, regardless, Space Ishtar has still held up really well over time, and you definitely will not regret rolling her. She is just one of the premier neutral damage dealing AoE farmers in the game, and yeah, if you manage to get high MP levels of her, you can do some pretty nutty stuff. So again, Space Ishtar is really good. Ironically enough, we just got done talking about Da Vinci's ability to give the party 20% charge, and well, welcome to Voyager. Same unit in that regard. He has the ability to give the party 20% charge after his MP. In fact, I believe if it's a pseudo-human or something like that, you have the ability to gain another 10% charge on top of that. But he does have a 50% charge kit. He does have a survival-oriented kit with his sort of anti-crit damage mechanic. The big thing you're going to want to watch out for is his overall damage output being fairly low. And again, his refund is just not that good as a quick unit. So again, I do think he could be a solid option for you in terms of weird sort of hybrid party comps, but I'm gonna say outside of that, probably not the best foreigner you could roll. Now, with regards to foreigners, right here we've got Yang, who is a single target arts-based foreigner. She is extremely good nowadays since they've dealt with a lot of the stuff in her kit that was a major concern. She has the ability to taunt all units now rather than just males. She does have hard survival with her invuln. She has the ability to drain AoE against an entire wave of enemies, and she also has the ability to charge from that. From there, she ends up also having an ability where whenever you hit her, she will inflict burn status to the enemy, and that is really important because her NP scales depending on there being burn debuffs on the target. This is where Honey Lake comes in, as again, it's a really solid craft essence on her because it not only gives her invuln pierce, but it also allows any enemy inflicted with burn to deal 40% more damage at MLB. And with it being an all attack scaling craft essence, it is just solid. However, it came from the Summer 5 event and rerun, so if you didn't get it, you don't have it. That is unfortunate, but hey, it is the way it works. That being said, again, you can still address the whole ability to get burn on a unit with Yang by virtue of using your command codes. So Yang can still do really solid damage, still be really tanky, and still be really a decent looping option in challenge content for you as a single target foreigner. Now, with regards to our 4 stars and 3 stars here, you guys can see, again, Canis is probably going to be one of the ones that jumps out, as well as Melt Lancer, as both of them are either rare or, again, just very solid in Melt Lancer's case in terms of farmability. I do think you certainly have some other rare ones here like Kijo Koyo, who I believe has not had a banner in a hot second. And again, if you manage to roll this, you are guaranteed to get Mandricardo, because you're guaranteed a 3-star, and he is the only 3-star available in that one. Next up here for our next year, you guys can see this one's starting to get a little bit hefty, and the reason why is because there was no 3-star available in this one, so they ended up giving you all the 3 stars functionally on it rather than giving you none. So looking at our, again, night classes here, we end up having Ibuki Saber, and Ibuki Saber was a unit that when she first came out on JP, I think a lot of people thought, she's pretty strong, but she's not the best. With time, we began to realize that, especially with the Koyanskaya system, that Ibuki is really good. And that's one of the things that I think you guys really should pay attention to, is the fact that she has the ability to double up some of her buffs and is anti-undead, which is just icing on the cake. The fact that she is a 50% charger is really solid for her, and I do think she can be your absolute go-to AoE Saber for that reason. You guys are going to get to see just how strong she can be when we get Tunguska at the end of the year, so I do think that she is a very awesome unit for you. Now, again, right after that, we end up getting Muramasa, and that's a unit that stole a lot of Ibuki's thunder. But hey, Muramasa is a sort of latecomer to the arts meta, and while he is still really good, again, Ibuki definitely has the tide in her favor in that sense. That being said, there is nothing bad about Muramasa other than maybe his damage output. And a lot of people deal with that by virtue of getting multiple NP levels and being able to really pop off. Still, I do think Muramasa being a 50% charging, anti-king, 100% crit damage, being able to charge with his Buster cards sort of unit is really solid. I do think him being AoE, him having Invuln Pierce and Defense Pierce is just amazing. So I do think that, again, he is a really good AoE Saber option for you, regardless of damage capability, because he's someone that can basically loop from 0 for you regardless. Now, next up here, again, you've got Melisande. I've said a lot about her in her recent analysis. She is a really cracked unit. She has insane damage capability, and she is going to usher in a new era for damage right now on NA with Koyenskaya and Oberon coming into the game. Her third skill is almost overkill, as she has so much charge there that she is able to not even really have to level it and still be able to 3-turn from 0. And that's kind of crazy. That would require you to have her append unlocked and maxed, but yeah, it's actually possible. Again, she has the ability to double up her first skill, and that allows you to have even more charge in her kit. But yes, she is a Buster unit that can 3-turn from 0. As if that weren't enough, she actually, in her first and second Ascension forms, is a single target Arts Lancer. So in her third form, she is AoE Buster, and when you press her third skill, it changes her into her third Ascension if she wasn't already. But if she is already in her third Ascension, her third skill then gives NP damage up, which again scales even better with Oberon. So as an AoE Lancer, if you were to go look at her raw neutral damage numbers, her numbers wouldn't look that good. But this sort of belies the point that her scalability is the best in the game at the current moment. So this is pretty nutty, and while we have had some units on JP that have finally begun to outpace her, yes, Melisande is absolutely crazy. You definitely shouldn't regret picking her up. Next up here, we've got Himiko. Himiko's an AoE ruler, and I do think she's another really solid addition to your Chaldea. She is a very crit-centric ruler. The way to think about her is as more of a party-oriented ruler version of Super Orion. She has the ability to, again, sort of give everybody in the party a stars per turn buff, which isn't just one stars per turn buff. They all are ticking at the same time, so you can get up to 24 stars per turn if you're in a three unit setup type deal. Again, she has 50% charge. She has the ability to really allow Buster cards to pop off. So I do think that alone as a ruler is worthy of your consideration. Next up here, we've got Doman, and Doman's AoE damage as an AoE quick alter ego is not that good. But again, this would be missing the forest for the trees, because what makes Doman so good is his ability to have 80% charge and his ability to provide his ability to provide chaotic and evil enemies with buffs. This includes himself, and so double Doman comps are often hilariously effective at both carding and farming out waves. It may not be the best, most high octane in terms of damage comp, but it is still a really solid option in terms of being able to move through things on a budget sometimes. So again, I do think Doman has a really good place as an AoE alter ego. Kiara Summer is, at the time when she comes out, our hardest hitting AoE unit in the game. This does fundamentally rely on you landing her third skill with all of its procs, because again, the way that she works is really convoluted. She has her first skill giving her, again, sort of guts and healing, but what it also does is it gives her a per turn sort of buff. That buff can then be spent for each stack that you have to enhance her second and third skill. Enhancing the second skill will give you more charge, enhancing the third skill will give you more damage. And again, it is super effective damage scaling, so it is fairly nice. But yes, as an AoE Moon Cancer goes, her art's damage is actually pretty insane. The real concern is, again, her actual refund. She does have that good charge capability, but I do think you're probably going to rely on good solid supports as well as the ability to card. This does make her not maybe the best farmer, but certainly a very solid challenge AoE unit. Speaking of solid challenge AoE units, we have Summer Abby here. And Summer Abby has the ability to defensive buff remove with her NP. On top of that, she has a skill that can also remove all buffs and is a 50% charging AoE buster unit with sleep. She is our first unit in the game with sleep before Oberon. So she is a really decent option in terms of challenge units. But again, her damage is not the best thing out there, even though she does appear at the top of the list. It's a little bit of a misnomer, as she does sort of deal a lot of damage with all of her debuffs stacked against one unit, but not so much to the surrounding units. She's more like a low single target damage dealer with splash damage, but hey, she is AoE, so you can still utilize her effectively. Van Gogh is another really solid crit unit. She does have the ability to, again, sort of terrorize her enemies and debilitate them. She has the ability to enhance the party's critical damage, and I do think she is a very fun unit to use in challenge scenarios. I have seen people even be able to manage to get lucky with their card strategies and be able to crit down waves and farm with her, but hey, I'm just going to say for the most part that's not consistent, so it's not much of a consideration. You can still, though, enhance crit damage very good with her, so I do think Van Gogh is a very solid, challenge-oriented foreigner for you. Now, next up here, our last of the 5 stars that we're going to go over, Castoria. I don't think enough has to be said about Castoria and why she's meta. I've had people ask me if I could only have one support in the game, which one would I have? And the answer is Castoria. She basically just ends up being really solid for all things, and odds are if you don't have anyone else, you can still take a healer or someone like that on support, someone else that will allow her to sort of cover the one demerit that she really has, and that is her ability to heal. She doesn't have any. But that being said, her Solemn Defense is an unpierceable version of Invuln on her NP, and it is really solid. On top of that, she's sort of our standard bearer for the arts meta, as she has the ability to 50% charge, including charging the party by 30%, as well as just really helping out NP gain and giving arts up to a unit. So I do think that alone, she is both a very good damage amplifier, very good looping enabler, and very good defensive mechanism for stopping the party from dying. On top of that, she has cleanse and attack up on the NP, so yeah, I do think that she is one of the best units that you can acquire, especially for those of you guys that just missed her banner. Miss Crane is probably going to be a lot less desirable as a support. She is not meta by any means, but she is a very fun support. The way to look at her is she is a costume-oriented support that allows you to be able to rotate the party without a plug suit. That alone is worth something, because the only other ways to rotate the party without a plug suit involves someone dying. Miss Crane does not have that happen. She does not require someone to sacrifice themselves, and can instead rotate the party for doing that. However, this is really hard to pull off in an actual farming application, so she's mostly relegated to break bar and challenge-oriented fights. That being said, she is an insane damage amplifier due to the fact that she can rotate at really no cost to the player, so I do think that she can be a really awesome unit for you guys to get for challenge scenarios. Then we have Morgan Le Fay, and I didn't mention this before on Castoria, but the biggest reason I think to roll Morgan Le Fay is not the fact that she's a 50% AoE Berserker. That alone is really solid. That allows her to be a good, awesome farmer for you in the Buster meta. Her damage isn't necessarily the best unless she's in niche, but certainly there are a lot of things that fall into her niche since she is anti-man attribute. The big thing that I'm going to say to utilize her that really helps her stand out from her other contemporaries as far as Berserkers go is the fact that she has Overcharge in her kit. And that allows her to function very well as a member of the Invincible comp. The Invincible comp is a very well-known comp that allows you to solve a lot of challenge scenarios and fights without really having to think too much. It is very standardized, very easy to go through the paces on. And again, if you build the pieces, it's pretty much involving her, Castoria, and Merlin. And there are other variants. I actually have a guide on that if you guys want to watch that. It doesn't have to include Morgan, but hey, there are some really strong applications then as a result of using Morgan that allow you to just sort of nope the fuck out when you really don't feel like doing a challenge fight. From here, we end up with Karen, another really solid AoE ruler. In fact, Karen's one of our hardest hitting AoE rulers, even in spite of the fact that she is quick. She's an AoE quick ruler that can loop from 0% charge. Again, she also has the ability to amplify her damage whenever there is a demerit on herself. And that is easy to get from either utilizing something like Black Grail, or even taking a unit like, say, an Avenger, oh, I don't know, like, you know, maybe Angry Mango, and throwing them in the back line of your party. That will still apply the Avenger demerit to the rest of the party, and count for her ability to scale her damage. So she is a very solid unit in spite of the fact that she is quick, and someone that can really end up being a solid looper and damage dealer for you. And last but not least is Tyra. We were talking about Jalter earlier and how Tyra's existence literally caused Jalter to have to get a buff. So again, I basically gave Tyra already a glowing review in the fact that she is a hard-hitting single-target Avenger who is quick-oriented. But her real strength, I'm going to say, lies in the fact that she is extremely hard to kill with her multi-times dodge and gut skill. On top of that, her Bond C can really help enable that even further. So yeah, I do think Tyra is a very awesome challenge-oriented Avenger for you, which is exactly what you want out of a single-target Avenger. Now, with regards to the 4 stars here, obviously we've even got units like the Fairy Knights in here. Again, our recent LB6 units that are going to appear in the GSSR, so that is a good thing. In fact, talking about this earlier, that is one of the reasons that we knew the way the GSSR and the timing of the anniversary was going to go down, as well as the timing of Lost Belt 6.2. This is because they had to get Melisson out before the anniversary in order to not scuff this GSSR. But again, you've still got sort of your summer units that can be hard to get your hands on depending on the time of year. And I am going to say that certainly even units like Watanabe and, God, I keep wanting to call him Virgil. You'll forgive me, I've forgotten his name all of a sudden. Are just really solid single target Saber options as well. But again, I think you're pretty much at a moot point with regards to your 3 stars here, as they're all available. Obviously, you've got someone like Bedivere here for the coins that can be really solid, but yeah, you don't really have an easy opportunity to be able to pull any one of these on a get-go because there's so many available. It's just going to be sort of a potluck as to which one you end up getting. So again, with regards to this, I do think there's some really strong GSSR options in summary. Obviously, year 1, I think, is just going to be really strong for units like Nero Bride and Gil. I do think potentially here Kentoki as well as Jalter are also really solid additions. From your next ones here, I'm going to say Squirtoria and Musashi and Ishtar are probably strong options there. Merlin absolutely is. King Asan absolutely is. And they're probably the big ones that I would maybe target there. And then certainly there's even more beyond that. And then from, let's see, year 3 here, I'm going to say, you know, Erish is not bad. Certainly Abby is great. And yeah, I might even say Okitan at that point for the ability to scale now with the Buster Synergy. Obviously, Ivan here is really solid. Obviously, Scotty here is going to be a really good pickup. And again, the rest aren't necessarily bad, but hey, it just depends on what your account needs. Again, Benny Inma and Jarger are both really good here, as well as, frankly, QSH and, yeah, even Mao Nobu are just really good. And then, yeah, like I was pointing out right here, obviously, Koma, I think, Arjuna Alter, and Reigns are awesome. Murasaki isn't bad either. We were just kind of talking about how strong each one of those other 3 units is. Again, I'm going to say Super Orion and potentially Romulus are your big good pickups right here. And then from the latter half of the year, honestly, I'm going to say Da Vinci, Space Ishtar, and Musashi, and maybe even considering Yang there as really decent options. And then from here, as we get into our final year, I'm going to say, yes, Muramasa, Melisson, and Honestly, it really just depends. Each one of these units can be situationally useful, but yeah, I'm still probably going to go with Ibuki. Those top 3 right there are probably your big wins in that one. And then realistically speaking, I'm going to tell you that all of these units are good. This last GSSR is really solid for you, especially people that maybe didn't roll the Lost Belt banners right there for those 2. But there's no one here that's bad. I would just say that maybe like Miss Crane is fairly niche. Still a good pickup if you don't have her though. So again, I hope you guys enjoyed this. This was my analysis of the GSSR. I did get long-winded. Hopefully, again, you guys found something in here that's going to be useful to you guys. Good luck with your GSSR summons. I will be doing them probably after the anniversary, either the night of the stream or the day after. I'll let you guys know. And if you guys haven't already, make sure you guys check us out on Discord. We just recently got the Lotto guide out for NeroFest. Definitely make sure you guys give that a look. And I will see you guys for the next one and give my voice a rest.